Bueno, arrancamos.
Let's get started. Seems like the problem with the cameras was solved. This first panel, this morning, it's an institutional panel. Honestly, the initial idea of this panel, this panel was designed at the request of some members of the regional governments of Andalucía and Extremadura who finally didn't come. So we had to redesign this panel. It's one of these things that seems to not be working, but that's because they're going to end up working better, because we have wonderful guests who are going to make their contributions, and these people contribute more to the development of intensive livestock farming more than those who stood us up. So I'm going to introduce very briefly one of the products of the Life Adapt project. This is something that we mentioned a couple of times yesterday. Part of this project was to draft a strategic action plan to adapt extensive livestock farming to climate change in the context of Mediterranean countries. So, I'm going to tell you really briefly what we did and how we did it. So I wanted to show you these images. We have a herd on the left, and it's one of the two last herds of the local breed of goats that exists in La Vera. It's an endangered species. This herd was kept by a young person whose parents are going to retire, and this person's question is whether to continue keeping this herd or to take another job that is better perceived by society and that allows this person to go on holidays, which may seem something very simple, but it's not an option for pastoralists, and many young people don't know whether they want to accept something like that. So this image is aimed at making us think. It's food for thought. Let's think about generational turnover. Even if we were able to address all these problems that we have been mentioning throughout yesterday, the truth is that it's an endangered job, and there's no generational turnover. There's nobody who's going to take over these jobs. And even if we are able to raise awareness about animal farming, even if we are able to pay more to account for the footprints in a fair way, well, even if we do all of that, there may not be anybody who wants to take these jobs, and we will run out of the local breed of goats in La Vera. There's something that I want to mention in connection with the generational turnover, and that is the lack of profit. This is a very simple graph. It shows us the evolution of the livestock inputs, and in yellow we see the price of animal products. Profitability is lost in a context where the life level, the capacity, the purchase capacity has increased for everyone else. So that's why this is not an attractive job. And I want to mention these two aspects to tell you that although the strategic plan is a strategic plan to adapt to climate change, because climate change is further pressure, the truth is that the livestock sector was already in crisis even in the absence of climate change. One of the aspects that we have tried to be really careful with when it came to creating this strategic plan was to not ignore those the approach or the visions of people who are in the sector, in the livestock sector itself. So we carried out a couple of workshops inviting all the stakeholders, researchers, but also farmers, livestock farmers, NGOs, forest agencies, firefighters, consumer organizations. That is the whole network of social support around extensive livestock farming. Maybe some of you who are here in the audience see are in these pictures because many people participated in the project as a whole. In the bottom we see some examples of the type of work, posters, flip charts that were used during the workshops. In this slide, what I want to mention is that in all the workshops that were carried out to elaborate in the themes, for example, herd mobility, animal health, water management, fires, soil fertility, territory management, in all of these workshops, the administration or the government was always mentioned not as an ally, but precisely as one of the obstacles, one of the hurdles. That is the administration, the bureaucracy, all the obstacles, the lack of regulation, of harmony in the regulations. So they are not perceived as allies. The government or local government is not perceived as an ally, but as something that facilitates intensification and something that makes it even more difficult for small producers. And this is something that I'm honestly going to tell you. We carried out a specific workshop to mention this topic about the lack of support from the administration, and we had a workshop to promote the cooperation between administrations, both top-down as well as bottom-up, and also cooperation between ministries, because there's not much coordination, and this gives rise to many challenges in terms of harmonization. And in this workshop, we had a hard time getting the representatives from the administration to just attend the workshop. So we published this document. If you took a look at the posters that are outside in the place where we have the coffee breaks, maybe you will have seen this. It's a scheme of what we have done. We have 4 strategic lines that include 13 strategic action measures. We designed the document in such a way that it can be used as a whole, and it can also be used to take a look at each single action, to have like a faster overview of each of the actions and the stakeholders involved. We pay very close attention to the participatory process. Currently, it is available to be downloaded in the Life Adapt project. The whole document or action or the different actions. I don't want to talk for too long because there are many speakers in this panel, but this is the scheme that we have, the strategic lines with the strategic action lines. So, this said, I'm going to give the floor to the panelists. Thank you very much for being here, and let's think about how the power in our country is divided. We have the state, the regional, and the local power. We have Guillermo Centeno, who comes from the General Directorate of Struggle Against Desertification. He is invited to make strategies to make strategies in this field. We have Pablo Canabelga, who comes from the environmental agency of the environmental agency in Portugal. They have acted in the Framework Convention of the United Nations in aspects connected to the struggle against climate change and soil uses. From the regional level, we have Irene de Miguel, who's an MP from Extremadura, and she's the secretary of Green Horizon and Revitalization of the rural environment of the political party Podemos. And we have Lorena Rodriguez, who was the mayor of a town in the north of Cáceres called Carcaboso. They have carried out very beautiful things there, and this shows us that towns themselves can support animal farming with different projects. They have worked to support agroecology very much.
Venga, le damos paso a Guillermo. Gracias.
Bueno, pues muchísimas gracias.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for inviting the Ministry for Energy Transition. I'm not in charge of forestries. I have been until a few months ago, but I work for the General Directorate for Forestry, Forests against desertification. I'd like to congratulate for the initiative of organizing this conference, and I think this is part of the needs that the sector has. Although it might seem we always say the same thing, it helps us to come to conclusions that will affect policies. So I'd like to encourage you to continue. The administrative context is very complex. No one knows how it really works. Based on my experience, which is a 20-year-long experience in Spanish central administration, I can tell you that sometimes you see surprising developments. You find legislation in which certain aspects are tackled that seemed impossible just a few years ago. Sometimes there are really unsurmountable problems like the generational turnover, the lack of generational turnover. We need to do everything we can to make this activity attractive for young people, since it has a lot of economic impacts, but also environmental benefits. So for those that are listening, I'll say that this activity will help you join a movement that has very ambitious objectives. One of them is to fight against climate change, which is part of the scope of the LIFE project. But I'd also like to mention biodiversity. So those are the main drivers. We have climate change and biodiversity, the main drivers of policies at the moment. And we should see how animal farming can contribute to those two objectives. The CAP, the Common Agricultural Policy, is disappointing us. It is a pity because sometimes there's just a greenwashing process in which everything stays the same. And I think that promoting extensive animal farming is an essential step, and there are a few milestones in this path. One is the information system on farms, animal farms. This is essential. We need to get more data and information in order to manage this sector properly. This is not unique to the animal farming sector, but until we get a better idea of what is going on, it will be more difficult to convince more people to join the initiative. The CAP has a series of objectives like promoting a smart, resilient, diversified agricultural and livestock breeding sector. No one can be against this. Reinforce environmental policies, promote economic dynamism in rural areas. Those are all objectives of the common agricultural policies. The problem doesn't lie in objectives. It lies in how we achieve them. We need to take into account that the common agricultural policy is the main policy of the European Union, and it accounts for 33% of its budget. And in extensive livestock, animal farming, not to mention forestries, only account for a minimum amount. But we do have the capacity and the measures that have already been designed to achieve our targets. So this is one of the advantages that this sector has. And we should also emphasize the need to integrate a more territorial approach. We cannot keep in separate boxes agriculture, animal farming. We need to enhance the integration of all those sectors. We should not only have forestry policies, agricultural policies, and livestock breeding policies. Those are all integrated activities that should aim to dynamize the rural areas. I'd like to congratulate you for the inclusion of livestock breeding on the agenda. I think that you're making progress even faster than the administration is doing. Be certain that this is what we have right now, and it is working. Your efforts are working, and promoting the sector doesn't just require general support. We need massive funding as well. We need funding to improve the quality of pasture lands, to improve connectivity, landscape connectivity, and those are all activities that need to be funded for investors to consider this sector attractive. So we should keep an eye on these aspects, especially in order to get to those incentives that can receive public funding, both at the national and the European level. I'm here to represent the forestry sector, but animal farming and livestock grazing is essential if we want to prevent fires, especially after the summer we've had with extensive fires all over our country, but also to promote other forestry policies that encompass all forests, but also grasslands and pasture lands. So I really encourage you to continue on this path. Thank you.
Funcionando, sí. ¿Se puede con este? Tiene que ser esto. Ok. Ok. Ok, muchas gracias.
Many thanks. I'd like to say that Spanish is not my native language, so I'm really sorry
Trabajo en la
about my Spanish. My name is Paulo Canaveira. I work at the university, and also I'm a advisor to the Portuguese Environmental Agency. I was invited to talk about adaptation policies. We have two main categories: adaptation and mitigation policies. Mitigation policies are more focused on emissions that are generated. Those are the main sources of emissions in Portugal, and here you can see something that is similar to many other developed countries. The main source of emissions comes from enteric fermentation, and in this case the main species is cows, and then we have fertilizers, the dung management, and then agricultural or forestry machineries. In Portugal, this accounts for about 12% of all emissions. When I talk about these sources, I also like to talk about the possibilities we have to reduce those emissions. Some measures are more developed than others. One of the most straightforward measures is genetic improvement and herd management, because when we think about genetic improvement, we always think about improving productivity or resistance to disease resistance, but we can also select those animals that have less, that produce less methane. And on what there is more research about right now is the diet improvement option. One of the options that has been developed more is implies improving the composition of pasture lands so that less methane is produced. There's also a whole host of feed supplements that improve their digestibility, and some food additives that might include this red algae, Paradoxis taxiformis, and this can reduce up to 80 or 90% of emissions. We know that grazing livestock depends on pasture land, and when we think of pastures, we immediately think of carbon sequestration, but that is not always the case. There are systems, when they're in good health, that are actually capturing carbon, but we also have the other side of the coin, that is the consequence of land degradation or trees that are dying and that turn into source of emission instead of capturing carbon. And of course we'll have in our territories, we'll have a mix of healthy grasslands and agropastoral systems, but also degraded and eroded systems in which emissions are increasing. Another possible perspective is looking at the energy, management of energy. Here we can decide to turn to renewable energies and reduce the use of fossil fuels. In Portugal, we have two main policy instruments to explore the possibility of reaching 2050 with carbon neutrality. That has been called Roadmap to Carbon Neutrality to 2050 in Portugal, and the other possibility and the other policy instrument is the National Climate and Energy Plan 2030 that establishes a series of targets for different sectors, including agriculture. As I said, this roadmap tries to explore the possibility of reaching 2050 with carbon, in a situation of carbon neutrality. So if we need to reduce by 20%, it's easy to say, okay, let's turn to renewable energies, that's all. But when we really want to aim at carbon neutrality, all sectors must contribute, including agriculture and animal farming. But if we look at the prospect of 2050, all sectors must contribute, but not all sectors contribute equally. We could aim at 0% in the energy sector, but in other sectors like industry or agriculture, it's more difficult because there are emissions that are almost impossible to eliminate, including the emissions derived from enteric fermentation. So if we get to the National Climate and Energy Plan 2030, there are a few targets that have been established. One is for agriculture, which also includes animal farming and plant productions. There are services, there are sectors, as you can see here, that have higher targets than others. But the idea was to establish targets for all sectors, including agriculture, so that we don't get this idea that there are certain sectors that can reduce their emissions and others that don't need to. Concerning the national targets, then there are different policies that have an impact on achieving those goals. The most important one, as is the case in Spain, is the Common Agricultural Policy, and therefore the Common Agriculture Policy Strategic Plan. Then there is another large number of policies that can contribute to this goal. And with this, I've finished my presentation. Thank you. If you have questions, I'll be here and willing to answer, and he apologizes with interpreters that are very happy with his Spanish.
Buenos días.
Good morning. I wish to thank you for inviting me here. I think the General Directorate of Agriculture and Animal Farming would not have rejected this invitation if he knew that you would have invited me here instead of him. I'm not going to talk very well about the policies that are carried out in Extremadura. I am a member of Podemos Extremadura, and we are the opposition. Mireia, when I told her that I was available to come here, well, we were talking about this, and she was asking me, is the regional government an obstacle or a support? Well, the administration is the final obstacle that makes many farmers to abandon their activity. And I'm going to give you some examples. The most recent example that we have was the demographic challenge law. It's a law that all the political parties agreed on by consensus. We had to make many concessions. I mean, we had to be very flexible. Lorena and I made it very clear that our red line was that we needed to have a specific section on extensive animal farming, and the answer was that we could not make that type of differences between production models. And with that answer, you can understand what type of direction the policies are taking. One of the regions that has the highest level of animal farming. If the benefits of extensive animal farming are not understood, and not only in terms of the production, but also in terms of social benefits, biodiversity benefits, and ecosystemic services. If this is not understood, it's very hard to have policies that strengthen it, because there should be this differentiation, this comparative disadvantage. There's this plan of firefighting herds, and it's like, oh, we reinvented the wheel. The news last week was that a goat keeper was going to be given 500 goats in the valley where I live, and warehouse was going to be, some facilities were going to be built. This goat keeper was going to come from another region, and we think it's wonderful. And I think it's, as Mireia was saying, this is an endangered activity, so this should be facilitated. But the tragedy is that very few years ago there were people from town who were keeping their animals in that same valley, and they had to abandon their activity because of some specific protocols, TB protocols, that made them impossible to have an extensive or semi-extensive activity. They were pushed to intensification, and someone who's in their 50s, who has been keeping goats for their whole lives, and who have had to be in that situation, they cannot start from scratch again, with all the uncertainty, the anxiety of having to have their animals sacrificed time and time again. My goat is my region is a region where there have always been goats, and goats have been key in the management of the landscape. And there's no extensive animal farming anymore. But deer are being sold to Germany, where they eat them. Those deer also have TB, tuberculosis, and all those slaughtering of animals because of tuberculosis didn't make sense. And I'm here in the veterinary school, but I hope you don't feel offended if I say that if in 30 years these TB protocols aren't changing the situation, and they're just slaughtering all the populations of animals, something should change. The only thing that's being done in the face of tuberculosis is depopulation. If we don't do anything, we're going to have awful fires because there's no management. So we have to choose. Either we sell powder goat milk to China, or we can have well-managed forests, villages that are alive. And this is a choice that the government needs to make. I don't want you to take me wrong. I don't want to say that there shouldn't be any follow-up regulations about tuberculosis and animal health measures, adequate animal health measures. But things need to change, and things need to adapt to the context and the specificities of extensive animal farming. We cannot keep implementing the same protocols to intensive and extensive animal farming. We can't do that, and that's the main obstacle as of today in my region for extensive animal farming to keep existing, especially when it comes to goats. So that's the most important obstacle. I don't want to wrap up without being propositive, because it's not only a matter of criticizing. Although I'm in the opposition in the government, we should also think about excitement and exciting options. I think the administration, the government has a lot to do. Generational turnover needs to be promoted, and the best thing is to make the activity profitable. Farmers need to be able to make a living, and we have made the greatest effort. I personally made the great effort to have a food change law that takes into account the production cost when it comes to setting a price. This law is not being implemented. I have to say it honestly. It's not being implemented by the ministry, and we have to fight for this law to be implemented, because it's the only tool that farmers have to fight for fair prices and avoid the abuses from distribution. But we have to move in other fronts. Consumers need to know what they are purchasing, what type of model they are supporting, because we're not only buying meat, we're buying meat that is avoiding fires, mitigating climate change, promoting biodiversity, making villages alive. And for that, consumers need to be aware. There should be some sort of certification or label. We have to move to an economy where there are fewer and fewer chains in the food links, in the food chain, because the prices that farmers are getting are not fair, and that requires strengthening cooperatives and managing things differently. Maybe, and Lorena's going to talk about this, maybe we should go back to having slaughterhouses in our counties, and we should avoid these mega slaughterhouses that make the financial and environmental cost of moving animals are awful. I was talking to a farmer here in Córdoba, and we were talking about the possibility of mobile slaughterhouses. That would be wonderful. Another very important thing is access to land. In Extremadura and Andalusia, that's basic. If young people can't access land, only those who inherit land will be able to make a living out of the country. There's lots of public spaces that could be used for animals and should be made available to farmers. And we should promote, the administration should promote the consumption of meat that cools the planet. Pig, and well, it depends of what kind of animal. Iberian pigs, yes, but chicken, no. Extensive farmed goat and lamb, that's cool the planet. We have to educate the young people in eating meat that cools the planet. I just have 30 seconds left, so I just want to wrap up by saying that I really hope that extensive livestock keeping is a goal for politicians, not only during elections. We should really have policies, and there are many tools to change things and to do this.
Muchas gracias a Mireia por la invitación.
Thank you very much, Mireia, for inviting me. Since, we were invited, this was a last-minute invitation, but this is a pretty good panel, and we really hope to contribute to this panel with the information that comes from where we come from. We want to thank you because You brought us out of the assembly and the parliament, and it's a great pleasure for us to be here, be in Cordoba, and be meeting friends like Mireia, Julio, Antonio, and this is something to that we are grateful for. I come from a 1,200 inhabitant town, Carcaboso. We were in the town council since 2005 until 2019. We carried out agroecological town policies that sadly, since the government changed in 2019, everything changed. Everything disappeared. And this should make us reflect as an institution, because it's not possible the resources that are deployed, public funds, go to waste because policies change. Right now we're in the opposition, but if things go well in the assembly, maybe we will be in power, and what we will be building, and we are a very constructive opposition, and we make contributions for improvement. Today we are here in this panel, and we agree in the fact that generational turnover is necessary, and it is necessary for extensive animal farming to be profitable, and we should be aware of what we eat every day. Our lives are faster and faster. There are more and more tensions every day, stress, and we are not aware of the consequences of what we do every day, and what we do impacts climate change. In the Parliament of Extremadura, we talk to MPs who don't recognize climate change. They don't accept that climate change is a reality, and then we have MPs who have a little sticker on their label about the SDGs, but are not doing anything about achieving sustainable development goals. Because if you say that you want to support, for example, a farmer or farmers in villages by having more cooperation between regional governments, what we see is that everything is made difficult when it comes to starting a farm. Particularly if you want to do, if you want to produce, if you want to produce like cheese or some sort of product from the animals. This we want, and when you want to process foods. In Carcaboso, we have municipal herds, and we also facilitated things for farmers, for creating a situation in which local meat and local vegetables and local food was sold in our restaurants. By facilitating this procurement, this is something that we can do. We have to give value to what we have. In my county, in the Valle de Alagón, we have 100,000 cows, and there's no slaughterhouse on a county level. So cows have to be taken outside our region. They go from our community to Valencia, and from there they go to the Persian Gulf. And this makes no sense whatsoever. One of the measures that Irene and I negotiated in the demographic challenge law was to have mobile slaughterhouses in farms themselves, because farmers themselves see that they're feasible. But then you talk to the administration, to the government, and how many local slaughterhouses have been closed lately. So there's that link that is missing. Another of the problems that we have with the government is working with civil servants. If you have to talk to the secretaries in each town and say, I want to change the way in which the ESAs and public soil is managed, when you go there, you see that the soil is so damaged after decades of bad management. And when you try to change that, you want to change the management model. If you want to get resources for that management, first you need to face the obstacle of the 5 farmers who are already using that dehesa, and then it's so hard to get resources for changing things. So this is another of the challenges that we have. And then we don't really understand whether those farmers are the farmers who are using those dehesas are doing so because they're getting money from the CAP. The government should not allow the use of public soil and public dehesas if there's no reasonable management. And some people are using those fields in a inadequate way and making money from the CAP. Javier de los Nietos is the mayor of Boalo, who has a municipal firefighting herd, and it's his son who's going to keep the herd, and his son is going to be a shepherd. We're talking about jobs that have to be promoted. The institutions should promote these jobs for villages to have a future. We have to eat, everyone eats, and healthy food is something that is necessary for all. So I wanted to make an emphasis on this. When we worked in the town council of Carcaboso, we tried to do institutional pedagogy. I remember very well some panels or workshops that we organized. I'm talking about something that we did 10 years ago. Nowadays, it's women who write the shopping list, and we have been working on GM food, and we wanted to raise awareness on what GMs are and how to write your shopping list. We need to know where food comes from and what we serve in our tables, and we also have to think whether the food that we buy is fixing population, and we need to raise awareness among consumers.
I'm also worried about future generations. We're not leaving them a very ambitious society. We can't deny climate change. It's already October, end of October, and we're still in short sleeves. And with all those policies that favored agroecology in our county, we have been insisting on the fact that this is to make life easier for livestock breeders in our county. And as Irene said, there are parliamentary MPs in our region that don't believe in climate change. We said that we wanted to organize a firefighting herds so that they could clear certain ways so that herders could transit in the region. They told us in 2011, no, it's a health issue. It would be a major problem. So people that start working on this, they should start being aware that we need to interpret legislation so that the life of our citizens is made easier. Of course, as a politician and policymaker, you can't be aware of all the problems, and those that live in the ground should help them understand there is funding, there is investment, there are investments, but they don't get where they should get. I've got other things to say, but since my time is over, I'll be here later to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Bueno, aunque imagino que estaríais muy interesados en hacer algo.
Although I guess you're very interested in asking questions or making comments, there is no time for debate in this panel, but the good news is that some of the issues that were raised in this panel, like profitability, will be tackled in the next panel, which will be about digitalization. There's another issue that Irene has raised, which is health issues, and it will be discussed as well in the last panel of today. Thank you.